If you're afraid of doing hard things, or if you're afraid of failing, then this is not the path for you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And that's the price. Failure is the cost of admission. The number one piece of advice is that it's hard and that's okay. So first visualize, like, what does success look like for you? Starting to break it down and deconstruct, why is that a vision of success? And what are the elements that are involved in there? Try a lot of different things, expect to do some losses, but it's the cost of running an experiment. The only time an experiment is a failed experiment is when you don't have the data to recover it. You can run an experiment and get a result that you weren't hoping for, and it's still a successful experiment because you got the data from it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Painting Business Pro podcast. I'm your host, Ben Landusky, and I am joined by a very special guest. This man is the founder of Paris Painting out of Minnesota. He's also founder and now on the board of advisors at Olive Holdings. Olive Holdings, awesome company. They partner with other painting companies across the country to scale them into stable assets. So it's my real privilege to welcome to the show the one and only Jason Paris.
Awesome. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, man. I'm excited for this convo. I got a bunch of questions for you. And yeah, I know our listeners, if you don't know about Jason, you should. Highly successful in the painting realm. He's a big part of the PCA and has a lot to do with especially the recent growth of PCA. And so it'd be wise to listen to what he has to say today. Jason, I figured just to start, tell us, just for those who don't know you, just a quick story, just kind of how you got into the painting world and how you're now a very big contribution to that world.
Sure. So I got into painting when I was in college. And so I was at the University of Minnesota, and there was a program called College Pro Painters. And it was kind of an entrepreneurial business format where you'd run your own P&L franchise of a painting business. So do the estimates, hire student labor, execute the paint job, manage the materials, spend marketing dollars, and then hopefully have some profit left over at the end of the summer. So I did that for a number of years. That was my real education. I then went into corporate America and spent 13 months at Fortune 500 land, a company called Automatic Data Processing, which was about as exciting as it sounds. And they treated me really well. I treated them really well. But kind of came to that classic conversation with me and my wife saying, hey, should I follow my passions? Something was unlocked in college where I had that entrepreneurial experience, or should I grind it out for the next 40 years? And I have an awesome wife. And so she said, go for it. Started knocking on doors in Plymouth, Minnesota. And then the rest was history. Kind of got into, I'd say, like niche fandom in like 2018, 2017, 2019 in like the painter internets. So we're just kind of like growing a multimillion-dollar residential painting company, which at that time was fairly unique. There weren't a ton of them. And was just getting plugged in online, got involved in the PCA. This will be I've done over 100 podcasts at this point, industry podcasts. So kind of did a big podcast circuit thing. And now we have a larger painting company in the Twin Cities. And then we partner with other painting companies, help scale them, which you referenced to.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So I actually did College Works painting, like a competitor of
That's
College
okay.
Pro.
It's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, nothing. Exactly. No, I mean, I loved everything I learned, but I never went into corporate. I just went like internship, quit, and then, joined Eric and with Foothills at the time. But so you went into corporate world and it was like, just not, why did you decide to leave that?
Awesome. Corporate is awesome. I mean, you get a nice paycheck and it's steady and it's consistent, and probably the best way to describe it is I'm a very passionate individual, and corporations aren't quite designed like that. Like, you can get a little bit of hybrid roles in certain companies. You get to the VP level where you kind of manage a P&L, but it's not the entrepreneurial experience. And there's probably nothing that I was better suited to do than a startup entrepreneurial experience. That's fully identity realized. That's where I thrive, is in the startup phase. So just following my passions.
Yeah, good for you. No, that's awesome. Okay, great. So tell us about like quick history on Paris Painting, because that was your original brainchild, right?
Yep, just a paintbrush and a dream. My last name is Paris, and so that's how we came up with the name. And like I said, knocked on doors, got my first couple of jobs, treated them like gold, canvassed the neighborhood, had like a $600 credit card limit, got some ladders. We kind of built the first couple of years just off of grit and hard work and understanding how spreadsheets work, which was a pretty novel skill set in those days for the painting industry. The industry is certainly professionalized quite a bit more than it was back then.
What's back then? What year was
back
that?
then? It was 2012. Started it. The LLC in 2014 started doing it full time. So, a little over 10 years ago. I mean, not too different than it is now, where it's basically, if you can execute a business model, that'll determine your growth. But if you can imagine, the bar was even lower than it is now. and the bar is pretty low now.
Yeah, it's
So
still
those were
pretty
the first
low.
couple of years of growth, and got some really cool guys that I went to college with who were able to take them on. The first one was through a partnership. So his name is Chet Funk, and he and I were roommates together in college. Three of my partners we roommated together in college, and then four of the five we all did college pro painters together. So they came on and started working for Paris Painting, and then we formed Olive Holdings together to kind of have a unified vision beyond just growing Paris Painting. Like I said, off to the races from there.
Yeah. So when did you start Olive Holdings?
Golf Holdings was formed in 2019. Our first acquisition was actually a flyer distribution company that was doing most of our marketing, and we were its biggest client. And the founder had tried to sell it and sold it to the classic mid-level corporate burnout. That guy did not perform well for us, and so when he went to try and sell it again because he had to take it back, we said, "Well, why don't we just buy it? We'll help you find a successor." And so it's partly to shore up that marketing was kind of a novel marketing resource in the Twin Cities, but also a big play on talent acquisition. So Nate Streeter is his name. He was the founder of Paperboy Marketing. He now handles all the marketing for our partner companies. And so part talent acquisition, part shoring up a vendor. That was 2019. 2020, kind of end of 2019 and 2020, we purchased a remodel construction company. We ran that for 3 years and then sold it. We made money on the transaction, but definitely was not worth the effort we put into it. So we learned what we're good at and what we're not good at. And then I want to say it was 2022 is when we started purchasing minority stakes into painting companies. That's kind of the life cycle of Olive Holdings so far.
Yeah, I on your website. So Nate Streeter, and then there's one other person, right, that runs your marketing.
So Caleb does Paris Paintings marketing.
Okay,
He's kind of his
great.
understudy. Micah would be the VP of sales. But Nate is, I think, the main marketing guy. Amy is a new talent that we just brought on. So I
That's
don't
who
know
I
her
saw.
that.
It was
Yeah, I
Amy.
don't know
Yeah,
her that well, but she's got
got it. Okay.
her track record and pedigree. I mean, she's been involved in larger home franchises for quite a while, doing some big
Okay,
things.
nice. I got to say, the name Chet Funk, what a cool name. Is that his real name?
It is his real name. It's his real name.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, destined for greatness, right?
I mean, yeah, that's Chet Funk. Yeah. I'm going to ask you some kid advice because my wife and I are 20 weeks pregnant with our first.
Okay.
Um, so I'm going to ask you that later.
Yeah.
But I think I'm putting that on it might just be like Chet Funk Landusky. That might just be the
Yes.
kid's name.
Yeah. Just hyphen
Boy
it
or
for the first
girl,
name.
doesn't matter. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
a win. It's going to be a winner if you name your head that way.
Exactly. It has to be. Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to so with Paris painting, and I do want to ask about flyer distribution too, because I want to go through as much with whatever time we have marketing, sales, production, like within a painting company. Because most of our listeners for Painting Business Pro members, I mean, they're anywhere from just starting like $0 revenue
Oh,
to 4 or 5 million.
okay.
Tell us about Paris painting. So last year, give us a size? Like
Yeah.
what's last year's revenue?
Yeah. 14 million top line in Paris painting. All
Nice.
Holdings was 50 million top line. Outside of that, we do investments. So we like to buy land. We develop the land. We build apartments. On our fifth apartment build, somewhat separate than this discussion, but still within Olive Holdings.
So that 50 million top line that includes the land purchases and such too, or is that just painting companies?
Yeah. The land
Yeah,
is like
nice.
probably like 70 plus million at this point with those
That's
five
awesome.
apartments.
Okay. That's
It
great.
was
That's
60
great.
with the four, I believe.
So for Paris, what's the team size that's managing 14 million?
I'm a little out of the day-to-day operations. Let's say there's 20 to 30 in the office, all in. And a lot of the roles are fractional, so it's a little hard to call that out full. Like we don't have a full time of much things. So you start getting down to the tactical level. But if I go quickly, there's all the painters, and then which are the backbone of the company. So there's
Yep.
all the painters, and then we have 6 or 7 estimators, probably 6 or 7 project managers, 4 or 5 coordinators, VP of sales, VP of production, CEO, CFO, COO, and then the marketing guy, customer experience gal. So it's
Nice.
probably in that 20-ish range.
Yeah. I mean,
20.
that's pretty great. So 14 million, I mean, with only 6 or 7 estimators, like that's some great, I don't know, value, I guess I'd say in a company.
Yeah, it's a good team. I mean, Micah. So Micah came on in probably 2018, and he was the director of admissions at a local college. And we didn't roommate with him, but he was in our friend circle in college. And he was basically selling these high ticket items called tuition. And he had recruiters that were underneath him for this university. And that was always the play with him was, hey, come into Paris Painting, sell paint jobs. Eventually, the goal would be that you have a team of people that you are the VP of sales on that are under you. And so he was very, very kind of like well situated to get into that role as we grew into it. and yeah, highly talented individual that developed an awesome sales team.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, so you were running the business from zero to what revenue
I'd say
roughly?
like 0 to 2.
Okay, nice. And then you gave most of it away, huh?
And then I've brought Chet on as a minority partner when
Okay.
we had passed 2. It was Chet and I for a little while. Then we brought on Alex, and Alex became our president. And Alex was given a small percentage of Paris. It was Paris Services at the time. And then we did some unique kind of financing deals in 2020. And then we set a new deal going to 2025 where Off Holdings became the managing partner of Paris Painting. So a little unique structure and how we set it up, and that we had a holdings company grow out of the original painting company. But
Yeah.
actually not too dissimilar, I think, from kind of College Pro Painters, which birthed out of it TFC, which is the franchise company, and ultimately birthed First Service International, which is one of the now largest property management companies in the world.
Well, I didn't know that. You know more about CollegeWorks than I
I
do.
was a stockholder, so I knew all about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, I didn't know. That is an interesting way to kind of form because so now Olive Holdings manages
Yep.
Paris.
Yep.
Okay,
Correct. Yep.
got it. Well, good. Well, let's get back to those first days. So, what's the advice you'd give someone who's just starting?
Yeah.
0 to 6 months old or 0 to 1 year old. I mean, obviously, it's different back then. When for us, as 16 years ago, a lot of door to door. I mean, we were like 99% door to door. Sounds like you guys were too. Quite a bit of door to door.
Yeah, I mean, we tapped into flyer distribution pretty early on, and that was a big hit back in those 2010,
Okay.
20 teens. So we didn't do a ton of door-to-door canvassing outside of that initial surge and like to get the
Okay.
company up and running. It mostly went to flyers was our primary marketing source.
Well, so what would be the advice, yeah, from 0 to 1 year advice you'd give the new startup
Yeah,
in this day and age?
I mean, it's a different age now, but there's probably some things to just maintain over time, and that would be that. I mean, it's the classic 0 to 1. Right? So it's a Peter Thiel 0 to 1 from nothing to something. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, and that's the price. That's the cost of admission. Failure is a cost of admission. So there are very few individuals that are able to do startups. They're able to go from 0 to something, and in our economy, those individuals are rewarded very heavily. They're creating valuable equity, and they don't have to purchase the equity because they get to create it. And so there's this expectation that like it should be hard. If you're afraid of doing hard things, or if you're afraid of failing, then this is not the path for you. Go work at the DMV or become an accountant if you never want to fail. You're likely going to fail. How quickly can you get up? How much can you push through? It's going to be really, really challenging. You're going to feel like the feeling that I always had is it only hard for me? Because it seemed like everybody else was just dominating and like had nice fancy trucks that were wrapped. I could only imagine, how much they were thriving. And I didn't have the perspective then that I have now, which is we're actually doing something that was really, really cool. But it felt like it was easier for everybody else. But the number one piece of advice is that it's hard, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that, man. It is hard. I mean, it's tough. Like, I think it was the CEO of NVIDIA who said, like, if he were to do it all over again, he wouldn't do it all over again. Like
Right. If you knew.
he
Yep.
wouldn't, if he knew, he wouldn't have done it. I'm so fulfilled by what we've built and all
Mm-hmm.
those days where I wanted to just sleep in and instead I went and knocked doors. Like, I'm fulfilled now, but man, that was tough. That was
Mm-hmm.
tough, especially those first couple of years. It's tough now too. It's just different tough. Okay, that's great. So what about business owners, companies that are a bit further along and they're starting to build their foundational team? Like they're 1 to 2 million maybe, and they're starting to hire sales reps, hire project managers, maybe hire office staff. What advice would you give them
Like
for
get
building
clear on
teams?
your vision, get clear where you want to go. Because you have a couple of like philosophical paths you can choose from now, and neither one is right or wrong. It's aligning to your philosophy. So it'd be clear of, do you want to build a business where it's basically an extension of you? So you like a highly leveraged individual with a lot of direct reports, and kind of the outcome of that is you can make a ton of money and not work that hard. And that is like, God bless America. It's a great path in life. In that case, when it's time to wind down your business, it's tough. It's even you're going to try and sell, take some chips off the table. It's hard to sell fractional equity in that because it's dependent on a very unique individual with a lot of direct reports to drive that P&L. But what I advise for someone like that is, make a ton of cash. You're going to run lean and mean. You're going to be a unique performer. You're going to have people who are, ride or died with you. They're also going to be high performers, and you can be very, very profitable and want to invest in real estate or the stock market. There's this other path you could choose, which is to scale your business into a stable asset. And it really is a divergence of two paths. And that's where, you have the opportunity to take some chips off the table if you want to divest a little bit. You have the opportunity to become more of a passive owner if that's the path that you want to choose. And you may find that your ability to leverage a team of individuals who have aligned incentives as a management team can perform much, much higher than you could as an individual. So kind of getting clear on what philosophy is going to be a win for you. Because that'll dictate some of the strategic decisions that you're going to make. From this, you kind of more from the board level, these strategic decisions that neither one is right or wrong, but it's dependent on the outcome that you're basically a sole owner. So you are the board, but what does the board, what does the shareholders desire? Getting clear on that.
So how would you suggest they do that? Like, how did you create, like if we were just watching you, how should someone create their vision? Like they sit down in like a open field with a pen and paper in hand, literally, or like, well, how would you recommend they do that?
I mean, part of it, if you don't know what you want, it's hard to create a vision. So I don't know if I have a great answer for that. Like it's kind of like, hey, I don't know what I'm passionate about or what I care about. I mean, you probably have some deeper work to do from there. But as far as what the vision of the company looks like, I don't know if I have a great answer for that. I'm trying to think how we did it. It's kind
Yeah,
of
how
a
did you
group
do it?
discussion. It's kind of get me back to, so like as a personal like passion project, I've done life coaching with people just so I don't play Zelda 5 hours a day recently. And what I'll do with them is like, so first visualize like, what does success look like for you? And people have different versions of success, and then kind of break that down. Like, why is that version of success successful? Like, to what ends is that vision achieving? What direction is that vision moving? The actual picture itself is somewhat circumstantial. And those are outside of our control. We can't control the circumstances, but there's like a derivative or a tangent of that vision that's going to be a little bit more clarity on what your intention is for this company to be. So it probably starts as easy as just visualizing what success looks like for you, and then starting to break it down and deconstruct why is that a vision of success, and what are the elements that are involved in there, and then
Yeah.
kind of writing your base code, so to speak, as a company, and say, here's the things that we want to move in an area directionally, independent of circumstance. And then given our best guess of circumstances now, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, how could that base code flush out circumstantially through results?
Yeah. I like that a lot. Well, that's such a good question. Like, what does success look like for you? You know,
Yeah.
because yeah, do you want to be that high leverage individual who makes a ton of money and but
I
has a
mean,
lot
for
of
a lot of
direct
people, it's like,
reports?
hey,
And
yeah, they walk into the office, everybody gives them a high five, and their team is
yeah,
happy, and they're all buying their own homes, and they get to do one-on-one reviews with their leadership team of 5 people. And it's like, what better life could you ask for that, right? And someone else might say, I want the company to have scaled, and I've got a vested management team, and I'm a passive owner. I still have equity, but I'm able to pursue other passion projects. As just an
yeah,
investor in this painting company. And those are, like I said, that's kind of those two philosophical life paths that you would go down. Another person might say, there's no better, if I had a bunch of money, what would I want to do? I'd want to restore old buildings by hand. And so why not just do that right now? Right. And
yeah,
so someone may want to be on the tools in the field. That may be what success is for them. So it's certainly a good question to get clear on. I like to say that intentions and directional statements should not change over a lifetime. How they are fulfilled or what the picture looks like definitely should, because circumstances change. You never step in the same river twice. So getting clear on those directional type statements would be just be some work to do.
yeah. No, I like that. And I mean, that's the word intention is what, for us and our company's a national painting group. It's like, well, what is your intention? Like always we're asking that question. What's your
Yep.
intention for having this meeting? Like, is there even a reason, is there a reason that we're even meeting right now?
Yeah.
Right. I
What
mean,
are your
and we've
intentions
actually,
with my daughter?
what are your what is your intention here at this place in this moment right now? But no, I think that's good. It's like, well, what kind of business do you want? I mean, and not the inherited view of like, well, I should do this or I should do that, or my parents still think I should get a real job, so I want to like build this thing to show, we got so many inherited beliefs from
Yeah, it's
the
not a bad
past.
path to go down until you hit your, mid 30s, mid 40s, and that's usually when someone has a midlife crisis. And
Yeah.
one of the most common things is like, I was just doing what society told me to do, or I was
Yeah.
just doing what my parents told me to do, and I never took the time to think about what do I actually want. And it's nice you can avoid those crises, because the power of kind of compounding by moving in the same direction over a long period of time, it's hard to replicate, and it's tough to do when you have to have a big reset.
It is. We have a lot of Painting Moves Pro members that, their intention was, I just want to get out of the corporate world. I just want to start my own business. And so I Googled one night on hour 80 of my work week, like what business should I start? And painting popped up. So that was their original intention. But now they've kind of been riding that for too long, where it's like, hey, well, do you want to build this thing or what do you want to do? So like, what's your intention here?
It's tough to maintain something over a period of time. That's where like intention statements should be, vague enough that they encompass all circumstances.
Yes.
It's like you did it and you just wrote out a goal, not an intention. That's actually something you can check off. For me, like how I describe intentions are not something you can ever check off. It kind of be like, if we take this out of the painting business, you say,
Okay, I get what you're saying.
what
Yeah.
are your intentions with your wife? You may say like, oh, I want my wife to feel loved. And like, you never get to check that off and say, great, I'm done. Like, I'm done working on that project. If you said like, hey, my intention is to get out of the corporate world, that's a goal, not an intention, because you can check it off and it's done.
Sure, I like that. That's great. Well, yeah, because it's like overall, the ultimate intention that maybe doesn't change for that person is I want to be fulfilled and happy and love my life. Now the goal is corporate's not doing that for me, so my goal is I got to get the heck out of here as soon as possible. One other question for you with growth. So at one of our companies, Foothills Painting, we did just under 7 million last year. We've been growing, but I feel like there's been like a stick. So like we've been at 6 million. We were 6 million 2 years in a row. Last year we hit just shy of 7 million. For a company that size? So we've got a team in place. What's your advice for us? Like, how do we go from 7 to 14 million? Maybe not in 1 year, but like as fast as possible, healthily.
Yeah, I think it's getting really good at leadership development. So how you develop those top, I mean, you're probably not, hey, we can't figure out how to recruit painters, or we can't figure out how to get leads. Maybe that's the issue, but it's probably like, how do we replicate like the management level? How do we build up the next leaders in the company? For us, when I think about going from 7 to 14, it was more, how do we get Alex to stop being the president and get Mark to be the president? And who's then going to be the next VP of production? And how do we get Micah to move not into just a VP of sales role, but start to become a CEO role? And then how does that free up chat? Building up that next layer of management is probably one of the key focus. If you were to say like Jason, like if I was on the board of Foothills, and I'd want to know a lot more about the company if I was going to be on the board, right? But let's just say, okay, here's a scenario. We're trying to go from 7 to 14. Here's our general structure. What should we be focusing on? I'd say like, hey, my feedback as a shareholder, like someone on the board that represents the shareholders, I would say, let's make sure we're really good at leadership development. I think that's going to be one of our key focuses. We've proven out that we can consistently scale at this point. We know how to go buy market share. We know how to produce paint jobs at a good margin. What we have to do now is get really good at scaling in that next generation or that next level of management.
Nice. I love that. How would one go about doing that? Developing themselves as a leader or developing a leadership team? I mean, are there courses or books or people that you follow?
So that's a tough. So I'll just tell you, like we do all the tactical things. Like we have a learning management system. We have
Yep.
competency models on how to develop people and rate them, and how are they following our values and all those good things. There's probably, when it comes to leadership, it's somewhat of an art as much as it's a science. So we follow the science route. We have all those things that ingrain culture, and you can watch people perform up it. But I've always been of the mindset that leadership is more a reflection of who you are than what you know or what you do. And leaders are really good at inspiring others. They get others to follow them, as opposed to a manager who has control over someone and they can make them do something and they can manage their outputs.
Yeah.
I think leadership, it's kind of like a good leader is someone who cares for other people, and you can't really fake that unless you are it. So I don't know. The answer for how we do it is we do a lot of those tactical things, but I think the real answer is that we've got a good culture and we can rub off and we can develop people, because it's more about developing the human than it is the knowledge base or the skill set. That's my 2 cents on leadership.
I can't agree more. Yeah. I mean, there comes a point where it's like, how many SOPs and textbooks, so to speak, can you study versus like, how are things at home? And like,
Yeah.
how do you like yourself? Like, are you,
Yeah.
are you good to your people? Are you taking care of yourself?
Yeah, people can smell. There's been like maybe like a theme in our zeitgeist lately, is like, for the PG version, people can smell poop. They can smell stinky stuff, and
Yeah.
you can only say that the emperor's clothes look great for so long, especially when someone's in a leadership role. And so, if someone holistically healthy is probably the best indicator of if they're going to be a strong leader. I'm not saying that someone can't be a good manager and can't run with authority, but if you're asking for influence, leadership's ultimately about influence. How do I influence others when I don't have control? You can't be an emperor with no clothes in that situation.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I will say too, just for and I assume you would echo this as well, but like when we're recruiting at our companies, the number one thing we're looking for is culture fit and the human being behind the whatever it is, sales, production manager. It's like, I can teach you, it's great if you have that stuff, but I can teach you how to sell a paint job and how to produce a paint job. I want to know, like, at your core, who are you and what makes you happy and why are you actually doing this? And I think that's number one thing we look for when we're recruiting people. Is that the same for you guys?
I hope so. Yeah, I'm not super involved in the recruiting side anymore. But yeah, it's kind of like they have their competency, their character. Is there a common sense of purpose? And then ultimately, do we just jive? Can you just generally connect with somebody? But I'd say the scrutiny definitely ratchets it up and this probably isn't like the right answer to clip into a 1 minute thing, but I think it ratchets it up as you go up the leadership level in the company.
Sure.
The right answer is, our painters character matters the most because they're the ones that are delivering the product. But, I think when you get to like a VP level, CFO, COO, CEO, the character side definitely ratchets it up over competency.
Well, thank you for that. To hop into like the ins and outs of a painting business. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just actually start with production and painters because you mentioned them a couple of times, and we agree 100% with they are the backbone of the whole business. I mean, they're with our clients more than anyone else, times 8 or 9. Yeah. I mean, they're the sales rep. You're with them for an hour and a half. A client for an hour and a half. Painter could be with them for 3 full days. I mean, maybe even 2 weeks, depending on the project size. So, what's y'all's philosophy, or how do you recruit painters? What's your philosophy on how to work with them? On that level between project manager and painter, or business owner and painter, even for a smaller company.
So we have a split shop. So I started out all employee painters, and then I was some subcontractors, then like half and half, then mostly subcontractors. And right now we're probably 90% production through subcontractors and probably 10% in-house painters. As far as recruiting goes, we've always just had success with networking. And so that's how we got our employee painters. I think it's probably how most of our employee painters even today are recruited. Is it's still like following a tree of employees know another painters, and that's how we recruit from. That's how we've got most of our subcontractors from the early days too. So I think the first subcontractor I had like a really nice professional estimating pack or something that I left in a Sherwin-Williams, and the manager didn't take it down or throw it away. And then a subcontractor saw it and was like, "Hey, this guy looks like he is going to be a lot more organized than the painting contractor they're probably working for right now." They called me and I interviewed them and tried them out, and then treated them really well, would go to their birthday parties. And it was a Hispanic subcontractor. And in the Twin Cities, the Hispanic community is super, super, super tight. So I'd go to their birthday parties. I'd bring my little kids with me. We'd hang out, and then I'd meet, all their friends who were also painters. And they're working for basically GC contractors, which is what Paris painting is at these days. So, and it's just very hard to replicate what I think our strengths were. And so Paris painting has always been really, really good at residential repaint, which is a lot of logistics. And so our logistical capacity and organization was unmatched. And I think it's still probably unmatched at this point. And that's a hard thing to do. And when you don't do it well, it provides a difficult experience for the subcontractor. Right? But if you can be really, really organized, they get like an organized experience. We also had the ability to manage financials to pay them right away. And so if we can pay them upon our visual inspection, our walkthrough, as opposed to waiting when the client pays, that's another thing that the labor force really likes. And then just treating them like people. And so I would just say in my market, that's a very, very difficult thing to replicate, where a subcontractor was able to find a painter that has the financial backing to pay them right away. They're organized enough that, the painting company's problems don't become the subcontractor's problems. And then they have like a cultural nicety to at least treat them like people and attempt to be somewhat normal. That was difficult to replicate. So we just kind of grew word of mouth pretty quickly in the Hispanic community, to where we've always had people knocking on our doors to be subcontractors.
That's great. So very organized. Do you mean like work orders clear, paint scheme, type of paint, like very clear, like this is what here's the job, contractor, here's
Yeah.
what you
And
do?
like I said before, if the bar is low now, imagine how low it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, most painting contractors, they still have a hard time adopting spreadsheets. I mean, most are getting there now, but the next thing is going to be AI, and it's going to take another decade before painting contractors really adopt AI.
Right.
But yeah, it's basically the pitch with Paris painting is, the painting contractor shows up and they paint the job, and then they get paid and they leave. That's kind of a very different model than many of the franchisors would operate, where they'd say, here's an envelope. I want you to call the client. I want you to finalize the options, select the colors, schedule the wash, complete the wash, schedule the painting, order the paint, deliver the paint, do the initial walk around, paint the job, deal with any conflicts that arise during the job, do a final walk around, and then collect the check and bring it back to me. So that's a very different experience than you show up, you paint. If the client has a question, you smile and say yes. And they say, let me call Mark. And then, when you're done painting, we'll walk around with you. If there's any issues, we'll address them then, and then we'll pay you on the spot. So that's kind of like the divergence of what it can look like in two very different paths.
Do your subcontractors do the power wash, or do you guys do that separately?
We do the power washing in house. So we do
Nice.
carpentry and power washing in house. And I would just say that was kind of a decision from early on because I found that the person who would do the power washing to get the next job ready was usually the crew lead, because that's the person that would be entrusted to take the truck to the next job site, which means that everyone that the crew lead was supposed to be leading would then be on to the job site without leadership. And it was a tough model for them, to where they end up losing productivity. So we said, hey, you just keep your guys on site. We'll do the washing for you. Similar, like if we do a walk around with the subcontractor, everything looks good. We pay them. We do a walk around with the client, and we miss something. Oh, on the chimney there's a spot. We give the subcontractor an option to say, do you want to come back and do this touch up, or would you like us to bring one of our interior crew or one of our in-house crews out there to do this touch up? And here's what it's going to take. Here's the number of hours. We'll just charge you at cost for it. Those are things that not every company is able to offer their subcontractors. And if you just put yourself in their shoes, just because I think like, how can you help them make the most money? How can you align the incentives? It's a little different now. Like the market's starting to change to where marketing is necessary again. But for like 10 years, like all the marketing companies were just stupid and not required. If you were limited by marketing, you were doing something real wrong in your painting company. Most companies were limited by their operational execution. And so you're competing as much for labor as you were for clients. It's very easy to find paint jobs. It was hard to execute operationally. It was hard to find labor. So you're really competing for labor just as much. The market has shifted in the last 2 or 3 years where it's a little more balanced, where like you do need to put effort and intentionality back into marketing, and the labor force is becoming a little more robust or a little easier to execute with. But that's the ebbs and flows of the economy at large too.
Yeah, I think that was our mistake back in the day. People say there's like a labor shortage. We don't see that at all. Like we have incredible painters.
I mean, there's never really a labor shortage. I mean, more and more paint was sold by Sherwin-Williams every single year, even through all those years. What was really happening is that painting companies were forced to professionalize for the first time. With the abundance of demand, they were like being requested to grow outside of their operating capacity that they were used to. And the most normal operating capacity when it comes to labor is like, it's going to be me and my immediate network and my friends. And then you have to start recruiting outside of your immediate network. And when you don't have like normal job descriptions, normal pay scales, like normal SOPs, like professional looking, like interview, a lot of people who don't know you personally are going to be turned off by that. And so the challenge I think that companies had is that they had to recruit outside of their immediate network for the first time because the market was demanding it. There's this big demand spike that was happening. And the existing companies in the painting industry and residential specifically, they weren't structured to meet that demand because they were used to operating within like the network capacity.
Yeah, and I will say, like right now, marketing is definitely changing, quite a bit. That's one of our constraints, is like we've got the structure at most of our companies to scale. It's the marketing that we're, every day we're getting better at, but it's more competitive than it's ever been, which is fine, but it's just a totally different way we're marketing. Really the last couple of years, really like pre-COVID, I think things have changed, I would say, quite a bit since COVID.
Yeah, it's fair to say. Now. If you even just take the PCA as a litmus test, and just take the PCA Expo as a litmus test, if you go to an Expo in 2017, 2018, that room looks very different than 2025. Just categorically, it's a lot younger. And I think that's true in the residential painting industry, that a lot of business owners are a lot younger. So we're starting to see that silver tsunami come to fruition. It's a lot more business minded as opposed to I'm a grumpy old, this is going to be a little bit stereotypical, but as opposed to I'm a grumpy old painting contractor, can't wait to get divorced and drunk tonight. I have a pot belly. You're seeing a lot more like business savvy, entrepreneurial, tech savvy people who want to grow a business instead of just have a job. And that's probably affecting the competitiveness. It's still a pretty low bar. It's not the low bar that it was 10 years ago. And if you kind of take the slope of change, it's kind of interesting to look like 5 years from now, it's probably going to be as big as a shift as it was, 7, 8 years ago. And so we think it's competitive now. It's probably only going to get more competitive, as it should be, right? It was 10 years ago. And even I would argue even today, painting contractors make way more money than they deserve. There's more demand than there's supply. And that is code for profit. And typically the market adjusts for that and they tend to compete those profits away. And you had this artificially deflated supply pool of competent painting contractors for a number of reasons. One of them being just societal pressure. It was really looked down upon to get into the trades, especially if you had any business competency. So that kind of artificially created that supply and demand gap, and that's starting to go away. But yeah, it'll be fun to look at over the next 5 years.
Actually, that brings up another question I have for you. So Scarcity mindset is definitely a thing. I mean, I've experienced it as far as like, man, how big can we scale this thing, or how much work is out there? Like, I have so many competitors now. I feel like I can't, get all the paint jobs I want. For the listeners, like, how do you they show how ungrounded that assessment is, like in any given market?
So this is something that so part of it just comes from math and logic. So I
That's
did
what I
this in
want to
the
hear. I want to hear
gathering.
the math and logic. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did this. This is the first thing I did in the gathering of Minnesota painters. So probably kind of around that original timeline before COVID, 2018, 2017, 2019, we started a little group called Gathering of Minnesota Painters. And one of the first kind of talk about intentions and how you strategically lay this out was to just break the ice and be like, hey, we're not actually competitors. And so I kind of thought through, how are we going to do that? And I grabbed a flip chart and I said, hey, just so you know, like Paris painting at this point is this much, like, we like to grow. And I just say, there might be some oddities to say, I don't want to help everybody here grow. But let me just prove why I'm actually not concerned about that. I said, let's just use the Twin Cities Metro for the areas that I'm willing to drive to. Right? There's 20 Sherwin-Williams stores in this metro. And each of them are doing, and this is in 2018 dollars. So with inflation, it's much different. But they're doing, let's say for easy math, they're doing $2 million each at each store. Right. So you've got $40 million of paint being sold from just Sherwin-Williams. And those are the areas I'm willing to drive to. And then you've got, Sherwin-Williams report that they own half of the market cap. So their other half goes to, I think Hirschfield's is our local player here. And then you've got the big box stores and they combine for the other half. Right. So then you take that 40, you divide it by 0.5, you multiply it by 2, and you've got $80 million of paint that's being sold in the Twin Cities. It's 15%, but let's for easy math, say it's a 10% cost of materials to revenue, right? So you've got $800 million worth of painting revenue that's represented by the paint that's being sold just in the Twin Cities where I'm willing to drive through. So you start to get to like gauge of like, okay, let's say my buddy Nick Slavic is, 45 minutes away. And I'm like, shoot, what if Nick like wins he's got this great beard. He's a craftsman. What if he wins every single bid that we go against? Like, well, if that happened, I'd probably would only have the under $798 million worth of painting in the Twin Cities to go after, because he's not going to grow any larger than that year. And I can only go over the rest of it. So getting just ground. Now this is in residential repaint. The Twin Cities isn't a huge, I mean, it's not Chicago, but it's still like a pretty big city for the metro area. But getting grounded in some of that math. Now, I would just tell you, if I was a painting contractor that specialized in water tower restoration, we repainted water towers. I would not be starting a gathering in Minnesota Painters Group. I would be slashing people's tires. But since I'm in residential painting, it's very easy to have that cooperation mindset and help raise the tides so that all boats lift up.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's great. Yeah, Paint Care, a company that you may know more about it, but
Recycle,
the nonprofit, right? That's like, they now have data on, because everyone has to, all the painting companies have to report. But in short, the numbers roughly in Colorado, all in Colorado, is like $4 billion a year industry.
Yeah.
$4 billion.
The Twin Cities aren't that different. So it's probably, that's actually a good way to do it, because you don't have to go to the paint stores, because they actually know, because the laws, they have to report every gallon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to have that. So yeah. All right. That's great. And just for all the listeners. Yeah. I mean, I know that's when you get beat out by other competitors, or you hear a competitor's name multiple times that you lose out to. It's like, you might want to check your sales process. It's not that there's a lot of work out there.
Yeah.
More work than any of us can handle.
What is their capacity? Like, if maybe you can't beat someone, but they will get beaten by the volume of demand. They will just, through attrition, not be able to continue to scale, especially if it's someone that you're losing to, because they're probably offering something that's not scalable. Yeah.
We have a company in Colorado that does around $25 million a year residential repaint. And we used to be like, man, how, we're competing. It's like that. It's okay. Like, that's totally okay. We could still get to that.
Even if they beat you every single time, just take the other stuff.
Right. Exactly.
And they probably aren't beating you every single time, right?
They're not. You're just hearing about the ones that.
Yeah, it's kind of like Arby's isn't like, oh, McDonald's opened up next to us. Everyone's going to eat a McDonald's. Like, there's this thing called personal preference. Some people like painting companies with blue logos. Some people like them with red logos. Some people like Arby's. Some people like McDonald's. There's personal preference, and that's going to dictate some variance, and not everyone's going to buy the same thing.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Any advice for people? I know you're not in the day-to-day as much, so maybe not, but just in the realm of marketing this day and age, what is the marketing mix? What do you recommend, for business owners, big and small, the realm of marketing?
My advice for marketing would be treat it like investing. You're basically going to be a data scientist. You would never invest in something and not know what the return is. And typically you want to invest more in companies that are doing well and divest from companies that are losing their value. So same thing with marketing. Like, you got to be a data scientist if you want to be good at marketing. I think Nate at any time is trying, 20 different things, even the things that are losing. He's always kind of running a test on them to see when they're going to pop off. And that'd be my advice with marketing, is to try a lot of different things, expect to do some losses, but it's the cost of running an experiment. The only time an experiment is a failed experiment is when you don't have the data to recover it. You can run an experiment and get a result that you weren't hoping for, and it's still a successful experiment because you got the data from it. But then stack your chips on what's winning, divest from things that are losing, and just be aware that those trends may change weekly, monthly, quarterly. Flyers, we've seen a big drop in ROI, from 2021 to 2025. So the volume
same.
of leaning into flyers is something that has ebbed and flowed. Like Nextdoor was something that was hot for a year or two. We certainly pumped a bunch of marketing into it, and then we still use it, but we edged off once it started to lose its ROI value. So it's always sexy and fun to talk about, like, here's the one thing you can hit this year and just dominate. But if you want to be actually good at marketing, you've got to be a really good data scientist. You've got to track everything, treat it like investing. You would never invest in a stock and not know what the ROI is. And you'd want to put more money into something that was raging like a bull, and you'd want to pull money out of something that was starting to sleep like a bear. So that's the advice I would give on marketing, not being a marketer.
Right. No, that's great advice. I mean, same thing happened for us. Flyer distribution was great, and then it really tanked, especially the last couple of years. Nextdoor, I know it's only February, but this year is like atrocious compared to 2 years ago. Last year it definitely dipped, and this year it's like almost non-existent. But again, for all the listeners, and I'm taking that advice too. The data science, I love your quote. Successful experiment is only a failure if you don't have the data. Okay, it failed. What did you learn?
If I don't get this outcome, then it's not an experiment. Like, do you know what the word experiment means? Experiment means you don't know the outcome. It's like definitionally, you don't know the outcome when you run an experiment. So now if you can't retrieve the data, then that's like, oh shoot, I kind of failed. But like if I want to run an experiment, I'm like curious on the outcome, and it's not what I was hoping for. It's not the outcome that makes me money. That's like a unfortunate outcome. It's not a failed experiment. It just depends if you're trying to run experiments or if you're trying to execute outcomes. And there are seasons, there are elements in a company, marketing or otherwise. You can actually put this in many different categories. You'd say you cannot always run an execution plan. You do have to run experiments from time to time, and you got to make sure you collect the data from that experiment so that you know what to then go execute on.
Real quick, do you guys do like any, so we do have some commercial painters and like people who want to get more into, especially like commercial repaint, multifamily repaint, things like that. Are you all much or big into that? I mean, it sounds like you're building condo complexes. And
we actually don't use Paris painting for our investments.
Really?
We use painting contractors that don't know what taxes are yet. Like that's what every apartment builder does. Paris painting cannot compete at the prices that we as a contractor get to, push on the poor painting contractors for in outstate Minnesota.
Yeah. Straight up supply and demand conversation. Yeah.
But I would say
you're talking new construction mainly.
It's new construction. Yep. These are new builds that we're doing.
Right. With the repaint world, is that same, or what do you all, is Paris painting and repaint, commercial repaint at all, or no?
They do some. It's not a huge part of what we do, but I think it's something we should continue to look at getting into. My advice on that would be like the grass is greener where you water it. We have not yet hit our capacity in residential. I think it's something we will eventually have to get into, as just the cost of acquisition and getting saturated may start to become a challenge, or just have a higher cost of acquisition as we get a little more saturated. But we're able to execute and win at some really good rates in residential. It's hard to want to jump ship.
Right.
But there's probably arguments for it. I mean, I know very few painting contractors go from commercial to residential. And I don't know if that's a outcome-based driver or a competency-based driver. People who start in commercial don't have the competencies required for residential. But I see a lot of contractors, going from residential to commercial, and I can certainly understand the outcome. And then maybe the competency is a little more transferable. But that might be something to say. There's a real reason to get into it, and we do some, but for the volume of all the revenue that we do, it's not like it's our main thing.
Right. Yeah, Sam. I mean, I think we're probably about, of the 7 million last year Foothills did, I think 80%, was residential, 20% commercial. Scott Lawler's, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's consulting for contractors, a great guy, works with a lot of our members. But what he's told me for several years now, and I finally did my own experiment. Now I believe him. I could have just listened to him at first, but you want to hire someone who's a B2B rep, and you don't want to even look at results really for 2 years. Just give it 2 years. Like, it just takes longer. You've got to build relationships. You've got to network, and you got to do it authentically. You got to build like real relationships. You can't just be like, send them coffee every month and hope that they send you a paint job, 100K paint jobs someday. You got to really build good relationships. We're leaning more into that. Residential is still our bread and butter, and we want it to be, but we're leaning more into commercial, and it's just building authentic relationships with roofers, property managers, real estate agents, and just saying, hey, it may not be tomorrow. It may not be, in a month, may not even be in a year, but like when you're ready, give us a shot. And we're starting to see the wave crash now after doing that for the last year and a half, we're starting to get some bigger jobs come through,
Yep.
but took time, that's for sure. Tell us about so a lot of our members may not know even know what PCA stands for. They may not know what the PCA is, and so tell us a little bit about the PCA.
It's the Painting Contractors Association. So it's a very, very old nonprofit. It's actually over 140 years old. Kind of started as like a brotherhood of old painting contractors. At one point, it was the negotiating arm of the painters union in America, and now it's like the big tent of cooperation among painting contractors. And so it's an
Competition.
organization that has events throughout the year. They push out content. It's a way to meet other people that are really of that cooperation mindset. But it's something I've enjoyed being a part of. So I kind of got involved in it kind of in that same timeline, 2017, 2018 that I've been referencing. And it's kind of when you get off the island and meet other people and you get to know them. And it's pretty cliche, but you kind of meet lifelong friends there. Get involved at events, kind of get your mind expanded a little bit. Yeah, it's something I've been involved in for quite a while and I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I highly recommend. So for whatever reason, we knew about the PCA, but we never actually became a member until last year. And that's actually where I met you at the PCA commercial
Yeah,
event.
that's right.
And I just, for anyone who's not a member, I highly recommend at least looking into it. They're growing and there's so much good stuff with that. And more importantly, there's so many good people. I mean, some of the people I met, like Maggie Kuiper, you, Chris Elliott, a couple of the marketing guys, I forget their names right now, but there's so many good humans who are just committed to running good businesses and helping people out. I mean, the amount of like just free advice I got at that 2-day event was like, oh my gosh, just amazing. So I'm
Yeah,
proud to
it's
say
a
we're
great,
PCA members 15 years
yeah,
later.
it's a great vehicle. There's kind of two paths where it provides a lot of value, especially when you're up and coming and newer. It's a great networking opportunity. And like I said, kind of learn what you don't know and go to an event or just consume the content online. But it's a great way to kind of get off the island, so to speak. And then as you become a little bit more mature in your business, it is by far, I haven't found one better. It's by far the best way to give back. So it's a great vehicle if
Mm.
you want to contribute to the industry, to contribute to those who are able to receive or have a desire to receive. It's a really good vehicle for that. I've sat on the board for the last 8 years of the PCA, and that's kind of one thing strategically that I continue to kind of push us towards is let's not lose sight of, one of the great assets the PCA has is a great vehicle to give back. It's a nonprofit, it's not driving the bottom line for any specific individual. It's truly a way that you can come in after you've had some success and help that next generation of leaders come to fruition.
I know. There's not many nonprofit organizations in the painting
No,
world,
it's the
is
only one
there?
for painting. There's a lot of like mastermind groups
Right.
and coaching groups and all those great things, and they all serve their place in the market. But this is the one that's a nonprofit. It's kind of the big tent where a lot of those groups come to be part of the expo and meet the members. And it's a historically unique thing too. I'm the former chair of the board. The current chair of the board is a good friend of mine. His name is Nick, and he gave a good commentary of we benefit from the shade of trees that were planted generations ago. This is a long-standing organization that has a long history of leadership that's wanted to not just give back in the current time, but have a foundation that can give back and support the future leaders of the industry as well.
You said 1884, right? It was started.
Yeah, that's when it was. I mean, there's some would say it went back before that. That's the official tagline is 1884, but it was kind of renamed, and I think it exists, back 200 years if you go back off of the old name.
And I did look it up when you said the word cooperation. It's actually a real word, it seems.
That's right. Yep.
I didn't know. I'm going to use that word a bunch now. I love that word.
Yep. And that was something I don't think I actually coined it, but I kind of made it in the little painting world. Started to throw that phrase out a lot in like 2018, 2017. I was on the PCA podcast. I was talking about cooperation, kind of more of a motto of the PCA and how instead of competing, you're cooperating. And I
I
think
love that, dude.
this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just going to vomit salad it a little bit. Kind of if you get to the root of competition, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard it. And it's a good story. If you get to like the Latin root of competition, competi, it's more of a mutual striving towards excellence. And that's how I've always
Hmm.
viewed competition. And I think about it in running, when you're running on your own, you're running at a certain pace and you're hitting these certain outcomes. When you're running next to somebody, sometimes you're striving towards excellence a little bit harder. It's that
Yeah.
competitive spirit that's driving you towards excellence, and you're mutually striving towards excellence. And I've always found when I'm trying to go for speed or distance, when I'm running next to somebody, I pursue excellence with more vigor, and I can tap into some of
Yeah,
that competitive energy. And that's how I view, business as well. Is, I think you and I hit it off really well. I was like, gosh, Ben, like I think we should just break the ice. Like I was call it out, like NPG and Olive, like we're kind of doing the same things. We're very different in many different ways, but some might view it as competitors. And but I was
yeah,
in the mindset of, competition just means a mutual striving towards excellence. And I think it's
I love
kind of
that.
like Wendy's is next to Arby's, Ford is next to Nissan and the car dealerships. Having multiple players in the market pushing this concept of partnership, I think is only a good thing for the industry. It's probably only a good thing for either one of us to have
Right.
multiple players kind of pushing that partnership concept.
I love that cooperation. And yeah, I don't know. Olive and NPG are very similar. I want to learn more about that maybe on another episode. But also combined, we have like 30 painting companies and out of the whole country. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, right? So
Yeah.
like, what are we
I
talking
think it comes
about?
down to the individuals too. And
Yeah,
what I've gotten to know you, and I've gotten to chat with Eric a little bit, share kind of similar ethos to what we've got over here. And there are certainly, I could imagine different individuals that could be running NPG or different individuals that could be running Olive Holdings, where it'd be much more aggressive competition mindset. And we're just more of the
yeah,
cooperation mindset. And I think the more players you can get like that in the industry, the better the industry does.
yeah. I agree. I agree. Well, two last questions. What are tell us your outside of running awesome painting companies? What are some of your passions in life?
So yeah, well, Zelda is just because I had a year of wandering last year. So I'd play like 5 hours of Zelda a day. I like running. Running is a passion of mine. I like flying airplanes. I got my private pilot's license last year. I kind of have these three macro passions. So like personally, I'm passionate about realizing human potential, spiritually, mentally, physically. With my family, I'm passionate about founding family legacy. This is my wife, with my children, and my estate. And then how I impact the world, I'm passionate about conquering the fear of mammon, and that's in my vocation and my volunteer and my relationships, and that'd be relationships outside of my immediate family.
Tell us what mammon is for those who don't know.
So mammon is a word. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. It's an old word. It's found in the Bible. It's kind of used in that scripture. It says you cannot love both God and mammon. So it's used kind of for finances and money. For my passion statement, I use it kind of a little more of a broad sense, where mammon are the shackles that mankind puts on itself to hinder it from serving our purpose. So most common, one of the more common ones in Western society would be mammon or money. Others would be like lust, greed, envy, hate. These are all shackles that only we can put on ourselves that hinder us from serving out our purpose.
I heard that in one of the other podcasts you did. I mean, money. I know for obviously a lot of listeners and for myself, like the mammon of money has been there. Like once I get really wealthy, then I can serve my purpose.
There's
Versus
kind of like
like,
two, yeah. There's like two elements of being shackled by finances, which is the original use of mammon. One is like if your liabilities outweigh your assets, you're not really free to do as you're called. Now, if your
sure,
assets can
yeah,
outweigh your liabilities, then you're very free to do whatever you want. You can't P&L balance or balance sheet your way out of mammon. Right? You can't out earn your way out of mammon. So I'd say like shalom is like the covering, the trump card. The peace of God is what can give you, conquering the fear of mammon. So that'd be kind of like
mm,
more overarching, the peace of God, understanding your identity, understanding that you're loved. But then there's also some tactical applications of, okay, if you're going into heavy, heavy debt and there's no path to get larger income, you're really putting some shackles on yourself. As
yeah,
opposed to you're like, hey, you're building up a balance sheet of assets that are going to produce income. And I can see an outcome where you're going to have your passive income outweighing your expenditures. Like you have a lot of options, and those shackles are really, really pulled off. Those are two kind of extreme dichotomies. There's a lot of conversation we could have around that. But if you're going to give me like a quick sound bite, that's how I describe it.
love it. Well, we're gonna dive into that more. Hopefully you'll come back on
That's
podcast
right.
one of these days. We're gonna dive into all that.
Anytime.
Um, Okay, last question. So, just from the past few months, just following you on social media, you're definitely your family unit is something that my wife and I look up to and would love to learn more about. You all have family meetings. I mean, I don't know the half of it, but what I've seen is family meetings, and the fact that you even just gave your wife a shout out at the beginning of this podcast is not always the normal thing I think men do. And so, what's your philosophy with both your relationship with your wife and as a family man and with your family?
So I'm not sure what to say my philosophy is. Well, I'll just tell you like my base code. I'm a Christian. The Bible, that's the book for me. So that would be the overarching philosophy. I'd say with my intentions with my wife, one is that I hope that she feels the love of God with how I treat her and how I honor her. Well, second to that is that together we would experience the full sacrament of holy covenant marriage. So those are my two intention statements that I have with my wife. as far as it comes to like a family unit with my kids, I want them to realize their holy destiny potential. And then selfishly, I also want them to desire a relationship with their parents as they get older. So those are probably more intentional statements. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question.
No, I think you
I
did. I
think
mean,
it's,
that's
I think
more,
it's
yeah.
the
What
best
are your
details.
intentions with your, yeah, I like it. Got it. Awesome. Yeah. Well, any advice for brand new parents about to have their first kid? How old are
I
you?
mean, I'm 37,
So you have
37.
four.
We have five.
You have five. That's
We have
right.
five kids. I think your capacity grows. It'll just be a startup. It's a startup. I mean, one is so different than none. I'll just tell you that one is so different than
Okay.
none. So typically, like when you get married, you lose a lot of your selfishness, and I imagine that's true for you. And then I like to tell people when you have your first kid, any selfishness that you still have is just beaten out of you. So you'll get to experience that. But yeah, your
Great.
capacity will grow. You'll learn how to operate when you're tired. When I had my first kid, it was like, this is like way better than any Apple product. Cause I was like a big, like follow the Apple announcements, get the newest product each year kind of a guy.
Yeah.
Like when you're holding like a little, like your baby, it's like, wow, this is way better than like an Apple Watch. It's like way better than an iPad. So you get the experience, the joy of that. But it's kind of like when I said with business advice, like it's hard and that's okay if it's hard. Like you've done something pretty miraculous if we weren't inundated with the frequency of it, which is like you created a life form that has a spirit and I would argue like has an eternal outcome. And we like are so exposed to it that we don't fully appreciate the weight of it. But you can imagine a world. I actually watched the movie just last week. The movie premise was like the human race was going infertile for like the last 20 years. And then finally, like the one child was born.
Children of Men.
Yep. Yep.
It's a
It
good
was
one.
recommended to me and it wasn't as good as I thought. I think the book is probably better than the movie.
The book's probably better. Yeah. The ending's cool. It's a different movie. I liked it overall, but
If it's hard, it feels like it's something wild. Like it is a wildly hard special thing. So it's okay.
yeah. Well, we're excited, and you who have gone down the path, 5 kids now. So I'll be asking you a lot more questions
One is,
around
I
that.
think one is the hardest. 0 to 1 is by far the hardest. And then for us, going from 2 to 3, now you go from playing man to man to zone defense. But after that, it's kind of like 0 to 1 is a big change, and then 2 to 3 is a big change. 1 to 2 wasn't that different, and then everyone after 3 is kind of like by that time you're so tired. You're like, oh, our fifth kid. It's kind of like, oh, you want to eat dirt? Like, see how that goes for you. I don't know if you enjoy it, go for it, I guess.
Yeah, dude. My wife and I are clean, like definitely germ and clean people, and I know it's going to be tough that first one, but then I'm sure once we have 2 or 3, it's going to be like
Yeah, just
whatever.
like things I would tell myself that I've had to come through just through like meditation and prayer would be if you want a clean house and if you want like more you time, you're picking the wrong life path. Like you're actually doing it wrong. For me, I have 5 kids and like I'll come home and the house is really messy and I'm like, I appreciate like nice rigid lines, like cleanness, like more kind of modernist style. And I'm like, you know what? If I wanted like a really clean house, like I did a really bad strategy of having 5 kids that are age 10 and under.
Yeah,
But if I wanted like a fulfillment of having kids, like the joy of leaning into that, there is an alternate life path available to me where I don't get married. I live in a high-rise condo. Everything has nice, crisp, clean lines, and I go home and I'm alone every night. That life path was also available, and I strategically chose not to do that.
yeah, yeah.
So, no, you're getting
Nice.
into what you want, and you're
Exactly.
letting things go that you might want, and that's okay too.
Well, thank you for that, and thanks for this whole time or
Yeah,
all your time today, Jason. This was awesome.
absolutely.
Appreciate
Anytime.
you. Thanks for being on the podcast, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll see you again.
Just want to give a quick shout out to 1.1x. Wait, did we already do
Yeah,
that?
tell us about that real quick. If you're watching, see his shirt, 1.1x. What is it?
My shirt has a blue line. It's a small slope, and it's a revolt against 10x because 10x is stupid. Don't ever 10x. That will destroy your company. You don't understand like how organizations are built. When you start throwing out 10x, it will just go end really bad. I'm more.
What'll happen, Jason, if we 10x'd our
Your
business
culture
tomorrow?
will
What
get
would happen?
diluted. Many things will break within the organization. Don't do that. You don't have to 1.1x either. I mean, that's kind of like at some point you want a 1.1x. I'm a big fan of 1.1x. It's progressive overload theory in training. You would never go from running 10 miles a week to running 100 miles a week, but progressively you would overload into that. So it's a little tongue in cheek. It's kind of the anti Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone's kind of like, if you don't have a target, you are the target. Like when it's doom and gloom, it's time to boom. More like, hey, let's chill out and let's 1.1x.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, there's a little like don't be a little bitch thing. I'm like, well, what if I'm having a hard day? Can I just relax today? Yeah, I love it, dude. Yeah, 10x is bad. Good things take time. So
To
just
take time.
everybody, it's funny how much if you just slow down, how fast you can actually go. Yeah, that's what we're experiencing. It's like we're slowing down, working on our systems, and we're actually growing faster than we've ever grown.
Yep.
So I'm gonna bring a 1.2x shirt to the next PCA event.
That's allowed. That's acceptable.
Just show you. Okay, good deal. Good deal. All right, thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Yep. Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the show. I hope you found it valuable. We make these episodes in the show for you, truly. So your feedback is super valuable to us, whether it's, things you liked, things you didn't like, what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of. Any feedback you can give us is going to be super helpful as we continue to evolve and improve the show over time. And if you want a copy of the Fast Growth Roadmap for Painting Contractors, which really simplifies the steps you take to building a business, we've got that resource for free for you. Just check the description or the bio where you're watching or listening to this episode, and you can just click and download that for free, and it should help give you a good roadmap for how to build and scale your business like the people that you're listening to on the show. So thanks for listening in. We'll see you soon.